Have you ever believed that the most important chapter of your life had already been written? That after enough heartbreak, enough lonely mornings, and enough silent nights, nothing truly unexpected could ever happen again? I believed that. I was convinced that love belonged to another lifetime. That hope was something meant for younger people with brighter tomorrows. By the time I reached my late 50s, I had stopped waiting for miracles. I wasn't unhappy exactly. I had simply learned how to survive without expecting anything more. But life has a strange way of arriving when you've stopped listening for it. Sometimes it doesn't come with grand gestures or dramatic speeches. Sometimes it comes disguised as 3 quiet knocks on an old wooden door during the middle of a storm. And sometimes, those 3 knocks are enough to change everything. Before we begin, if you enjoy heartfelt stories about second chances, healing, unexpected friendships, and love that arrives when you least expect it, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every story here is written to remind us that even after life's darkest seasons, hope can still find its way back home. Now let me tell you about the night that changed mine forever. For 7 years, nobody came to my front door with a reason that mattered. Delivery drivers came and went. Neighbors occasionally waved from across the street. Children selling raffle tickets knocked every now and then. But no one ever knocked simply because they wanted to make sure I wasn't alone. Not until that evening. The storm had been threatening all afternoon. Dark clouds gathered so slowly that I barely noticed them at first. By lunchtime, the sunlight had disappeared behind a heavy gray blanket stretching across the entire sky. The wind picked up little by little, bending the branches of the old maple tree in my yard until its leaves whispered against the windows. By evening, rain was falling in thick sheets. It wasn't the kind of gentle rain that helps you sleep. It was loud, relentless, the kind that makes every room feel smaller. Every gust of wind rattled the windows as though someone unseen wanted to come inside. I stood quietly in my kitchen, one hand resting against the edge of the counter while the kettle warmed on the stove. The house echoed with a silence I had grown familiar with. Not peaceful silence. Not comforting silence. Just emptiness. After enough years alone, silence becomes another piece of furniture. You stop noticing it because it never leaves. 7 years. That was how long it had been since my husband passed away. People often imagine grief as something loud. Crying. Breaking down. Collapsing beneath unbearable sadness. They don't tell you about what comes afterward. The ordinary days. The grocery lists. The doctor's appointments. The birthdays celebrated quietly. The holidays that somehow become smaller every year. Grief isn't always dramatic. More often it's routine. It teaches you how to keep moving while carrying something invisible. During those 7 years, I learned dozens of little lessons nobody prepares you for. I learned to sleep in the middle of the bed, because staring at the empty pillow beside me hurt less that way. I learned to cook smaller meals, though I still caught myself reaching for 2 plates before realizing I only needed 1. I learned how strange it feels to hear your own laughter after months of hardly using it. Even making tea became different. For decades, I automatically filled the kettle for 2 cups. Then one morning, without thinking, I filled it for 1. That tiny habit somehow hurt more than packing away old photographs. It felt final. Friends often told me I was incredibly strong. They smiled kindly whenever they said it. You're handling everything so well. I don't know how you do it. You're stronger than I could ever be. I always thanked them. What else could I say? The truth was much less inspiring. Strength had nothing to do with it. I wasn't brave. I wasn't fearless. I simply woke up every morning because morning arrived whether I wanted it to or not. Sometimes surviving looks remarkably similar to courage from the outside. Only the person carrying the weight knows the difference. After a while, people stopped asking how I was doing. Life moved on. Children grew older. Neighbors moved away. New families arrived. The world kept turning. Mine simply turned more quietly. There was one constant through all those years. The man living next door. We had been neighbors for longer than I could remember. He wasn't the kind of person who demanded attention. He never spoke louder than necessary. He never inserted himself into anyone else's business. Every morning, if our paths crossed while collecting the mail, we'd exchange a polite smile. Good morning. Morning. If we happened to return home around the same time in the evening, there would be another small greeting. Hope you have a nice evening. You too. That was all. Simple. Respectful. Comfortably distant. If someone had asked me to describe him, I probably would have struggled. Not because I didn't know him. Because I had never truly looked. Some people exist quietly enough that they blend into the background of everyday life. He was one of those people. Reliable. Gentle. Unassuming. The kind of neighbor everyone appreciates but rarely thinks about. At least, that's who I believed he was. Until the power went out. Without warning, every light in the house disappeared. The refrigerator hummed once before falling silent. The microwave clock vanished into darkness. Even the comforting sound of the kettle stopped. For a moment, all I heard was rain pounding against the roof. I sighed softly. Power outages weren't unusual during storms, but they always made the house feel even emptier. I searched through a kitchen drawer until my fingers found a box of matches. A few candles still remained from years ago. I lit one. Then another. Golden light spread carefully across the room, leaving soft shadows dancing along the walls. The house suddenly looked older. More fragile. Memories seemed to appear in every corner. I carried one candle into the living room. Outside, lightning briefly illuminated the neighborhood before everything returned to darkness. I lowered myself into my favorite chair and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. There wasn't much else to do. No television. No internet. No distractions. Just the sound of rain and thoughts I usually tried not to entertain. It's amazing how quickly darkness encourages memory. I found myself thinking about my husband. About the first house we'd bought together. About the terrible wallpaper we both hated but couldn't afford to replace. About the road trips where we'd gotten hopelessly lost because neither of us wanted to stop and ask for directions. I smiled. Then the smile disappeared almost as quickly as it had arrived. Missing someone doesn't become easier. You simply become more practiced at carrying the feeling. Minutes passed. Or maybe an hour. Time behaves strangely when you're alone. Then, knock. 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 Not loud. Not impatient. Just 3 gentle taps against the front door. I froze. Nobody visited during storms. Especially not after dark. For a brief moment I wondered if I'd imagined it. Then it came again. 3 soft knocks. Careful. Certain. I picked up the candle and walked toward the entrance. The old wooden floor creaked beneath every step. My hand rested on the doorknob for just a second before I slowly opened it. Standing beneath the porch roof was the man from next door. Rain had soaked the shoulders of his jacket despite the shelter. Tiny drops clung to his silver hair. In one hand he held a sturdy flashlight. In the other was a well-used stainless steel thermos. His expression wasn't worried. It wasn't awkward either. It was simply thoughtful. As though coming here had been the most natural decision in the world. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Then he offered a small smile. I thought you shouldn't have to sit through the storm by yourself. His voice was quiet enough that I almost missed it beneath the rain. There was no pity in his eyes. No obligación. No uncomfortable sympathy. Only genuine concern. It caught me completely off guard. No one had looked at me that way in years. Without thinking too much about it, I stepped aside. Please come in. Neither of us